That's it. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 prakim Rambam, Hilchos Tmidim Umusafin, prakim Gimel, Dalid, and Hey. Pei Gimel is going to tell us the Seder of the Ketores, exactly how it was brought. We're going to learn in Pei Gimel the Dishun Hamanoira. We're going to learn the Rambam's understanding of the meaning of Hatavas Neidoi Seha, Big Machlekes Rishonim, unique Shitas Rambam, that the menorah was actually lit tamid, even though the chatzi loig of every lamp only lasted basically throughout 12 hours, but they would kindle it at night. And the Rambam holds they would rekindle it in the morning. The Hatavas HaNeidos didn't only mean clearing it out, but it meant to relight it, to make sure it's going to light until the afternoon. And Pei Gimel is going to teach us about the Seder of the offering of the Chavite Kohen Gadol, as we learned that minchas, which was the same as the minchas chinuch, was brought by the Kohen Gadol every single day. Pei Gimel has 22 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph, says the Rambam. Mitzvahs asay lahaktir haktoires al mizbach hazov shebehechal, and the mitzvah is to burn it up there pamayim b'chol yoyim, as it says befedish, and that is baboiker ubein hu arbayim. Shenamar, as it says, v'hiktir olav ahav and ketores samu. Now, if lo yiktir baboiker, no matter, even if it was b'mezid, yaktiroi bein hu arbayim afil loyim mezid, then they can bring it in the afternoon. However, that the Mizbeach Hazov was already used once. But if it's a brand new Mizbeach Hazov, either because we just built the Beis HaMikdash or because something happened to the altar and we made a new one, the Ein Mechanchin Mizbeach Hazov Elo Baktoides Shel Bein Ho'arbayim. In contrast to what we learned yesterday, that the Chanukas of the Mizbeach Ha'olah can only happen by Boiker. Same thing. If we didn't bring, God forbid, the Tamid Shel Shachar, you bring Ben Arbayim. But to be Mechanech, the Mizbeach Ha'olah, you have to begin with the morning. It's an interesting concept. The Mizbeach HaKetoros, or the Mizbeach Hazov, must be inaugurated dafke by using the Ketoros. Ben Arbayim, dealing with the animals, that you have to wake up in the morning. The animal is very strong. You have to first sacrifice the animal. When is a person able to touch senses, the highest of the senses that we have? That is only la'achar the avoid of the day. And maybe even more, dafka when he davens mincha, that type of mesiras nefesh, to stop the day, that is when we are able to tap into the highest offerings. And ketores is the highest level of a carbon. Ketores actually means making a knot. So if a carbon means to get close, which is what it means, to be mekad of ourselves to God, ketores means to become one with God. Halacha base. So even though we learned about the shiurim of other 368 manim, let's go into other ways of weighing it. Mishkal meya dinarim. It will be the weight of 100 dinarim. A dinar is approximately 4 grams. 100 dinarim is approximately 400 grams. And as we mentioned, it's divided into 2. Chamishim abayker, v'chamishim beinu arbayim. Mizbeach shene'ekar. Wow. Even if the Mizbeach was removed from its place, so then you bring the Ketores on that location. That means you would put the coals on the floor. The Makayim HaMizbeach Hazov, Maktir and Ketores b'Makayimai. Another interesting rule, Ketores shepaka me'al gabi HaMizbeach, afilu kiratin sheba, even 1 grain of it, ein machzirin oison. In contrast to the Mizbeach Ha'olah, that if something was expelled off the Mizbeach, as we learned, if there was some meat on it left, then you would bring it back up. Not so. No, there's many differences, and this all has to be better understood. The lesson, the Hira B'chaim, of the inner meaning of the Mizbeach Ha'olah, of the Nefesh HaBahamis, and then of the higher avoid of reconnecting ourselves to God, or knotting ourselves with God. Halachim. During the time of the burning up of the Ketores portion, no one was allowed to be, not only not in the Heichal, even though there were people that were needed to be there right prior, as we'll see. But while you put the Ketores on the fire, no one was allowed to be there. Not only not in the Heichal, even in that area, Mibein Ha'ulam, La Mizbeach had to be emptied from all. And people would wait for the offerer of the Ketores to leave the Hechel for them to know that they are allowed to enter. And that's not unique. Where else do we have it? The dam hachatois hanasos bifnim. The avodas adam is also portion hakohen lebin olam mizbeach hachiyetze, as it says v'chol adam leyeh ba'oil moy b'voy lechar b'kodesh. And from there we learn binyan av l'chol kapara b'kodesh, any kapara that's done b'kodesh shelo yeh sham adam. In other words, the tshuva, let's say, is a lonely, not the negative lonely. Every person has their tshuva that they have to do. It's not a communal thing. When you're doing the ketores, when you're doing anything that brings a higher, the deeper level of kapara is something private. You do it by yourself.
People, when they do the ketores, they go out all the way.
Everyone would always go out all the way. Everyone would go out all the way. Halacha Daled. Ketzad say that aktoras ketores b'chol yom. How would they bring it? So mi shezacha b'dishun mizbeach hapnimi, the one who won the lottery and guided today in Perek Dalet. In the next Perek, we're going to learn about the lotteries. But whoever won the lottery to clear out the mizbeach hapnimi, taking off the used up coals that was used yesterday, they would enter first. And they had a holy utensil that we called a tani, and this tani was made out of gold. And how large was it? And when he would enter, he would put the tani down, not on a table, on the ground. And first, the kohen would use his hands. He would remove the ashes, the pecham, the coals that was on top of the altar. Again, all of this is used from yesterday. He would, with his hands, gather it inside the tani. And then, machabed means with a broom, with a ta'ata. That means there must have been a certain type of broom that was at the end used to sweep up all of the remaining ashes and coals from yesterday's avodas hakatoros. In other words, you cleared out the top of the golden altar. Now he would leave the tani at this time. Remember this, and he would leave. Now, he would take a utensil that had in it overflowing ketores, and that utensil also had a covering. And the name of that keli in which the ketores was put is called a bazach. Now we said it's overflowing. They make a kiddush club. We don't want to use any drop of the ketores. So under this bazach, there would be another keli that we called a kaf. A kaf is a spoon. Actually, the kaf had the long handle like we have today in a spoon. So the kohen, as we'll see in a moment, he held on to the handle of the kaf. In the kaf, you had the bazach. You understand? The bazach had a metal cover, and then the kaf was covered with a beged. He would hold the kaf in his hand and hold on. So that's already. So he's doing the main avodah. But the nichnas, when he would enter, prior to him putting it on the coals, the imoy ached, someone else would have to go in with him. And what would that other person be doing? He would have the shovel, the fire pan that had fire in it. And as we mentioned when we learned yesterday about the three marachos, that the second pyre that was on the western side of the top of the altar had in it that was special fig logs that mamish did not turn into ash. They became coals. And that were the coals that were taken from the top of the altar in the shovel that's going to be deposited on top of the inner altar. Now, how were the coals collected with this shovel? Whoever won the lottery. Again, we'll see the lottery in the next Perek. They would have a shovel of silver, and they would run up to the top of the mizbeach. And he would go to that pyre that was b'ma'aravai of the mizbeach. And he would first stoke the coals here and there. In other words, he wanted to get the innermost coals. And he would take the coals that were fully consumed, because when you begin with logs, you have logs. We don't want wood. We want the wood after they were initially burnt, not that they're ash, when they're coals. So they're glowing red hot. Whoever's looking at the picture, it's the one to the left, the bottom left. The yoyed, then he would go down the ramp. Uma'aran, and he would now pour the coals from the silver shovel into a machta shozav, into a golden shovel. Now, when you pour A to B, it's possible that something in A will fall on the ground. So even this positive, if a kav or less fell on the ground, then then you can sweep them up into the channel that went out of the azara. We learned yesterday you're not allowed to extinguish the fire. Yeah, you're not allowed to extinguish the fire on the altar. Once you removed the coals in a new keli, the kavana to take it into the inner mizbeach, it's not called eish shel mizbeach. This is called the eish of the ketores. That can be extinguished. But we don't care if only a little bit fell out of the silver going into the gold. Shabbos muksa, Shabbos, you're not allowed to extinguish anything. So koifa aleim hapesachter. So you have this utensil that we already spoke about. It's a large utensil, some sort of pot, and they would cover the coals over with the pot. In other words, you can't move coals on Shabbos. You can extinguish them, but you don't want a kohen to step and burn his feet. So for protection, you covered. That was that whole sugya, something that you can't move. Can you move a keli for something that cannot be moved? When there's a danger involved, for sure you could, aside of the fact that in most cases, rabbinics were not applicable in the temple. Ain't shvus v'mikdash. Not a hard and fast rule, as we'll see noch today. No. So he said, graf shalre'i, that's a heter, why we are allowed to move muksa even outside the temple. Here we're speaking about extinguishing is the Isur Doiraisa. Kibui. For kibui. You're going to move around the coal, you're going to extinguish. Huh? Kibui is Doiraisa. Machai is one of the Lamatas Malachas. And kibui is an act of tikkun. Because it's sure it is. You don't want to get burned. You're extinguishing something. Now, if more than a kav was lost when you transferred the coals from the silver shovel into the golden shovel, then you need to get more coals. Then you run up to altar, and you're going to collect more to complement the amount that you need. Halacha both. Now that we mentioned that on Shabbos you use this psachter, so the Rambam makes another with the numbers. For three things this psachter was used. Number one, the one that we're talking about now, that if coals on Shabbos spilled on the ground, you would cover the coals with this psachter. Number two, if you find the dead sheretz in the Beis HaMikdash. So again, you would remove it. On Shabbos, you can't move a sheretz. Here you have the Muksa Yaakov. And Cloud, you should know, Chevra, I know, again, that's the Siyum of Eruvin. I remember younger, you would think that Ein Shvus B'Mikdash. Yeah, that's a rule. There are many exceptions to the rule. So they would cover the sheretz for people not to become tummy from the sheretz. And what did we just learn about last week? Whenever they would remove the ashes from the tapuach, I don't know why he brought this picture over here, but okay. So then you would remove it with the psachter. Now coming back to the ketores. Allah Chazayin.
That's the picture of all the vessels in the Beit HaMikdash. I'll post it on the chat.
Very, very moved. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, good. Allah Chazayin. Very serious. Now that these two are entering, the one that removed the ashes re-enters. Why? I don't know. No, he didn't do it before. In other words, what was the problem? He left the tani on the ground. Now he enters to remove the tani from the ground, and he bows down and he leaves. The goal is no one should be there. Now, the one that has in his hand the shovel with the coals, he would array the coals on the top of the golden altar. But how would he put them? He didn't want to have a pile. He wanted them to be evenly spread about. How do you evenly spread about coals? Don't use your hands, you'll get burnt. So he would use the bottom of the machta. So he would have this golden shovel. So he would use the bottom of the shovel to like harmoniously spread them out. And now he would bow down to Hashem and he would leave. So who do you have left now? You have left a kohen with a kaf. Now the only thing is that the kohen that's holding the kaf, that has the bazach, that has the ketores, Yahal's cup, he is not going to pour the ketores from the keli on the coals. He needs someone else to help him. So the Zeh Shabiyadei Akaf, who was the one that won the lottery to offer the ketores, He will take the bazach outside the spoon, and he's going to give the bazach to someone who he designates. So what's interesting is that this helper was not part of the lottery. He would give it either la'ahuvay to his friend or to his relative. Who comes first, a friend or a relative? The Fedish and the Rambam. Friend is closer than a relative. Not always, but that's many times it's that way. Not my relatives, but your relatives. And why did you have again the kaf? Because maybe some of the coals spilled out of the bazach. So when he takes the bazach, they look inside the kaf. And to make sure that if anything spilled there, we want to collect it. So so the guy that came in with the utensil is going to open up his palms. He's going to have both of his hands opened, and his friend or his relative will pour all of the ketairos, be'ikr from the bazach. And if anything spilled into the kaf, so now the ketairos is in his palms of his hand. What was unique, what we learned about on Yom Kippur, that on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol needed to do it by himself. That was one of the avodas hakashos, how he put it in his mouth, how he need to get it out of his mouth. Here, he had a friend with him. Point is now his friend or his relative would now remove all of the kelim. All you have now is the Kohen that won the ketairos, with ketairos in both of the palms of his hands, and he's standing by himself. Now, before he put anything, they told him. They told to the guy offering the ketairos, he saw it. Be careful. Don't begin with the area in front of you. So, guys, if you can just picture, you're the kohen, you had the mazel of winning the ketairos. You're going to open up the palms of your hand and allow the ketairos, which is powderly, to fall on glowing hot coals. And you're going to have to spread it out over the mizbeach. So there's two ways of doing it. You can begin with the area in front of you going forward, which is what they told you. Don't do that. Because the moment the ketairos fell on the coals, smoke came up. And your hands are relatively near the surface of the mizbeach. That smoke can burn the back of your hands. You would have to begin from more distant and spread it out to the best of your ability harmoniously. You're looking at the wrong altar here, coming towards you. So they told him that. He saw it again. Don't begin from the area that's in front of you for you not to get burnt. And he would gently allow the ketairos to fall on the fire or on the coals, just the way someone is sifting flour. Until this kohen spread the ketairos over all of the coals. And don't forget again, the coals were spread out by using the back of the shovel. So the coals were spread out and the ketairos was not put in one place. It was spread out evenly from farther to closer. Now someone told him, offer it. Now we just mentioned no one is there. So it must be that the one who told him hakter, now this memuna could have been the skan kohen gadol, or could have been someone designated. He was standing outside. Im kohen gadol. So then the memuna would tell him more respectfully, not hakter, ishi kohen gadol hakter. Now this memuna is still standing there. I got it. In other words, after he was told to do it, he didn't do it right away. Because we began by saying that when he offered the ketairos, no one was allowed to be there. So after he was told, hakter, offer the ketairos, now everyone stepped back. Everyone left the sanctuary. Everyone other than him. Everyone not only left the sanctuary, but he went away from the area between the ulam and the mizbeach. The yakter hamakter, he would offer the incense, and then the ishtachve, the yetze. And as we're going to learn in the next chapter, just to giving a heads up, that offering the ketairos was made the person wealthy. So this was the one avoida that if you in your group won it once, you would never even enter the lottery. It's not fair even to enter the lottery. Only if everyone in your group got the ketairos once, only then do you get to enter the lottery, potentially to get to do it again. Another detail, whoever brought it in the morning would not go for the afternoon unless everyone else in this group won the ketairos. And that was how the ketairos was unlike all the other avodas, as we'll learn in the next chapter. So when they made the lottery to offer the morning Tamid, they didn't make the lottery again for the afternoon Tamid. If you won the morning, whatever you won, you did the same thing in the afternoon. The exception is the Ketores. Okay, gewaltig. With all the skulas and the concept of being a sandik, there's many similarities. Also, is a skula for wealth, and that's why normally, unless it's a tzaddik in a family, a person gets sandikos once. Okay, halacha yud to share the wealth. Dishun hamanoidam. Now, next topic of this chapter is the removing of the ashes from the menorah. The word hatavas means the preparing of, unique Rambam, preparing and rekindling. The rekindling is Shita Saram. The Rashba argues, Rashi argues, we're learning the Rambam. Hatavas neither sell, and the hatava, again, the Rambam means the clearing out, and the rekindling was done in the morning and in the afternoon, and that's a positive commandment, as it says, These are the psukim that we have in the beginning of Tetzaveh. Many of us that learned that Rebbe's Maimon Va'ata Tetzaveh are familiar with these psukim. Stam lohoy, that these psukim you have in the beginning of Tetzaveh and towards the end of Emor, and they're almost verbatim. Tadlakas haneiros doiches haShabbos. Tadlakas haneiros, which is done every day, not only is done on Shabbos, but if the neiros are tamei, if the kohanim are tamei, they override tuma, just like any carbon that has a fixed time, as it says lahalois neir tamid. So the word tamid means even the Shabbos, even the tumah. Halacha yudal. The kama shemen onois lechol neir. How much oil went into every lamp, and the shiur is chatzi loik, as it says me'erevad boiker, which means 10 loik yemida shiur doilik me'erevad boiker. And we estimated that even in a winter night, if you have a half a loik of oil, of course, the thickness of the wick makes a big effect. You can have a lot less oil, but if you have a thin wick, it's going to consume it less. But that was the estimation, a half a loik. Another rule, so the menorah, which is done in the sanctuary, is like the Ketores. The Rambam is trying to say, when you have, even though the Rambam holds that you would also kindle the menorah in the morning, only the Rambam, but if you have a brand new menorah, you don't begin in the morning. It means if the Goyim, if the Greeks, they were makama the menorah, or they stole the menorah, and now you finally got a new menorah, if you got it in the morning, if you didn't do it the night prior, you would not begin in the morning. You would wait for the afternoon, like Ketores. Halacha Yud Beis. Umahu dishun. So the meaning of dishun means clearing out. So he says, kol ner shekava, any time that a lamp burnt out. So you have to take away the wick. You don't reuse wicks. And all of the remaining oil, you have to clean out. You use a material to clear out any oil residue. Then you put a brand new wick, and you put in new oil with the measure of a half a loik. That is dishun. Now, the zeh, very good picture, the one who removed it, would ultimately put all of these remains, as we learned yesterday, in that area where they would put the ashes, the haramas hadeshen, that miraculously got swallowed up on the floor through the stone. That is the same place where they would put all of the remains of the menorah. And that was imdishan amizbeach hapnimi, and also the remains we didn't speak about before, the tni. So where did they bring the leftover burnt out coals and ketores from prior day? From the tni, in that same place on the floor of the azara. And now the Rambam writes umadlik neir shekava, and they would rekindle it. What they would clear out, not the way Rashi learns in Chitas, and leave it until the afternoon. When they would come here in the morning and they would have the candles that already were extinguished, they would clear it out, dishun. They would put in new oil and they would rekindle it. The hadlakas haneiros, that's the meaning of hatava. The neir shematzoi shaleikava, another din. Hatava doesn't only mean to rekindle it. Many times when you look at a lamp, I know today everything in America, today we have the menorahs, we have these little floaties. Everything was made more convenient. But sometimes you can look at your lamp and you have the wick is still lit, but you see that the wick is in a position that if you don't reorganize it, it's going to be extinguished very short. So the meaning of hatava doesn't only mean to rekindle it, it means to fix it. And they had tweezers, they had special utensils that they manipulated the wick to make sure that it's going to be better, burn better. Halacha Yud Gimel. Ner ma'aravi shakal. If the Western lamp became extinguished, we learned in Gemara 3-way machloikas which one is the Western lamp. The Rambam, as we learned in Hilchos Beis Abchira Perek Gimel, already passing that the menorah was positioned from north to south, unlike the other kelim of the Beis Hamikdash, if you remember, Shitas Rambam. And therefore, if the menorah is aligned north-south, they are all equally close or far from west. What's the meaning of the western lamp? So that Rambam explained that the wicks of 6 of the 7 branches, the 3 from the right were facing the center. The 3 from the left were facing the center. The wick of the middle one, the wick was placed towards the west of the lamp, facing the Holy of Holies. That's why it was called the Ner Hamaravi. Not because the lamp was closest to west, but because the wick was facing and closest to west. So this is the middle one. So the Rambam says, Ein madlikin oisei achar dishunai, that if this got extinguished, from where would you get the fire? You would only be allowed to take the fire directly off the outer altar. But all of the other candles, if one candle got extinguished, you can kindle one from the other. Let me explain what that means. So the lamps on top of the menorah were fixed. They were part of the branches. But the wicks were very long. So let's say even though every lamp had the same amount of oil, but we mentioned they're not going to go out at the same time because the wicks were not made in a machine. The wicks were handmade. A wick that's thinner, that lamp will burn longer. So when the Kohen walked in there, if one was extinguished and one was lit, other than the middle one, he would extend this long wick from the one that's going to be lit. He would schlep it over with the tweezers to one that's already burning. So one would light the other. By the way, when it comes to the menorah, that's the whole machlokes hamoraim in the Gemara. If you're allowed to, I think it was Rav and Shmuel, whether you're allowed to do it or not. But in the Beis Hamikdash, they did it that way. Again, the only one that if it was extinguished, you don't light it from another, but you have to go back to the outer altar is the Ner Hamarav. Okay. Halacha Yudalet, Ketzam Adlikar. Moshe Chapsila, like we mentioned, you take your tweezers and you would take out the wick. And the wicks were very long until you reach a nearby burning lamp. Why don't you move the entire lamp? Because the lamps themselves, the cups themselves were part of the menorah. You can't move them. Oh, no, 1 second. Now, 1 second. Here's the kasha. Why do you have to extend the wicks? Why didn't you take today a match, put the match near a lit candle, and then bring it to the one that you want to light right now? The answer is because going from a match to a candle is fine. But where would you get the fire from this match? The match is choil, it's no kedusha. You would get it from a lit candle. That means you're taking something holy and you're giving it to something that's choil. That stepping down is a bizayin. So the only solution is lighting one from the other. Now, by the way, when it comes to the menorah, that was the whole machlokes. Why don't we do it by the menorah? Because the fear is that when you light one wick to the other, you might put out the wick. That was the whole, the one that's burning. And then the Rebbe spoke so many times about the idea of reaching out to another Yid. Why do you have many segments of Jews that are hesitating to do that? Because like Noach, they're afraid that if they're going to go out there in the world, they're going to get extinguished. That was the original machlokes that we have. Like, what is our responsibility to worry about yourself first, or to worry about your fellow Jew first? That's the way that Rebbe explains that whole machlokes. Halachat as well. When it comes to lighting Shabbos candles, if you remember the whole sugya in Shabbos, and we had this in the Rambam. So the point of Shabbos is that you want to have oil that is burnt nicely, and you want to have wicks that allows for the oil to flow through harmoniously. So all of the wicks that are not allowed to be used on Shabbos because they don't burn properly, and a person inadvertently might come and fix it on Shabbos, which is Isur Doiraisa, also Lahadik Memba Mikdash Memenoida. Shenemer, as it says, Lahalu Isner Tamid, which means Shetiyash Alevis Oila Me'ala. And a shalevis that will rise upon its own is a shalevis that it's a good quality wick. When you would come in the morning and later in the evening, you would not prepare all 7 at the same time. They would do 5. They would take a break. They would do another avodah. Who remembers the other avodah is that when the limbs were already on the ramp, they did not go straight on the fire. They were put down on the ramp. And after they would prepare the first 5, then they would take the limbs and they would put it on the fire. In other words, they would complete the avodah of the tamid. Then they would go back in and they would prepare the other 2. Why did they do that? To get everyone's attention. Sometimes you don't do everything in one time. You do it subislach. It's more involved. Halacha Yud Zayin. Kol ner shekavon madlikin oisim in there acher mehem k'moshe b'yanu. If a candle goes out, like we mentioned before, you rekindle it. Kates and say that hatova. How do you rekindle it? Again, hatova, according to the Rambam, doesn't only mean prepare it with new oil, new wicks. It means also to relight it. Zesh Zajac, the one who won the lottery of clearing out the menorah, he enters. And in his hand, he has a keli that was called a kuz. And that kuz was made out of gold. And it looks like a large pitcher. So you have to first begin by clearing out the old. You would clear out all of the wicks that were already used. And you would clear out all of the remaining oil that's in the lamp. And then, like we mentioned, 5 and then 2. And now, the kuz that in which you have the old used wicks and oil, you would leave in front of the menorah, very much like we learn now that the tani was put on the ground. Where would they put it? There was this stone that had in it 3 steps in front of the menorah. They would put it on the second step. And he would leave. Stam lahoyer, that before, when we learned about the Mizbeach HaZahav, we learned about people bowing down. The Rambam doesn't mention it here. Doesn't mean that they didn't bow down, or doesn't mean that that no need to mention it. I don't know. Now, and afterwards means after the limbs were brought up on the Mizbeach, and now you're going to do the final 2. Again, and now that you cleared out all the 7, now you're not going to leave this keli, this kuz, and now you bow down and you go out. And that's that. So now we spoke about the hatov. And the final topic of this chapter is the offering of the Chavite Kohen Gadol that was also done twice every day. Chavite Kohen Gadol mitzvah asay la'akriven b'chol yom. And as we mentioned, even though they made 12 challahs, but 6 in the morning, 6 in the afternoon, half in the morning, half in the afternoon. And that was offered together with the Tamid. So the one in the morning was offered in conjunction with the morning Tamid. The one in the afternoon was offered with conjunction with the afternoon Tamid. Whoever's using a Chayenu was on page 129. Ovili Shasa, now kneading of these breads and the baking overrides Shabbos, overrides Tumah like any carbon shekavol izman. As it says, tu fine, even though we had another limud before, but we also learned from the words tu fine that it should be na'ah, it should be attractive. You know what attractive means? Fresh. Fresh means not baked yesterday. So if it has to be offered today, it has to be baked today, even on Shabbos. And even if you know that everyone is starved, maybe tomorrow people will become tamei, you do it nonetheless. Even if you, aside of it not being fresh, if you were to prepare it yesterday, then everything that was already sanctified in a Kli Shabbos becomes invalidated if it's overnighted. Tipasel belino. Now, Shahamar Cheshes, here's a big problem. Guys, we just learned to see the beauty of learning 3 chapters a day is that even people like us with not the best memories, we just learned it. The Chavite Kohen Gadol were not made in a marcheshes. They were not made in the deep pan. They were made on the machavas. Now, we don't change a Girs and the Rambam, but all of the classical commentators say that this must be a mistake. It must be shaham machavas. Be that as it may, the utensil in which the Chavite Kohen Gadol is made has a din of a Kli Kodesh. Kli Kodesh gives Kedushas Haguf. Kedushas Haguf becomes Pasal Belino. So therefore, another reason why it needed to be made every day, and therefore, if it has to be offered every day, it has to be made every day, it's made even on Shabbos. Even though normally baking on Shabbos is the Isur. Halacha Yutes, Tchinas. However, the grinding of the flour, the sifting of the flour, that could be done outside the Beis HaMikdash. And it doesn't have to be done every day. And therefore, you cannot do it on Shabbos. It's a coin brought half, the coin Gadol. He brought half. And he passes away. If someone can mute themselves, that would be great. Or if the Kohen Gadol became Tamei, or he became a Balmum, and therefore they appointed another Kohen. So the new Kohen, guys, if people on the Zoom can please mute themselves, that would be great, is which is all what's needed. He cannot bring from the first Kohen Gadol. So in other words, you have half left. The rule is Elamevi Isaden Shalom. He has to bring a brand new Isaden. He only offers half. So his half and the old Kohen Gadol's half, they're both are going to be lost. There'll be a total of two Israelim that are going to be brought. But 2 halves, the half of the first and the half of the second will be lost. Now, what happens? What do you mean lost? These 2 halves that cannot be offered, you can't burn them up right away. You can't burn them in where you burn the psulei hamikdashim. Manichin, I think it's shmulik. If you hear me, if you can mute yourself, that would be great. So manichin oisem achataver tzurasam. You have to wait until either it gets ruined or it gets overnighted, and the yoytzim lebeis hatzreifa. And after it gets overnighted, then you get to burn it. Someone can call shmuli. You can try over here. So then the kohen gadol, the same kohen gadol, has to bring another one, and again you only bring half, and you only bring half. The heichon sarfan, where was it burnt? And the answer is ba'azaram givaldik. And the final halach in today's chapter, in this chapter, is meis kohen gadol b'shachris. The kohen gadol passes away after he brought half, and they didn't yet appoint another kohen gadol. So now there's a unique thing. So the Yarshim have to bring a holy sudden, and listen to this. They make the chavitin and they offer all of it. It's going to chap that day they're going to bring chavitin and a half. Meis kohen gadol before they bring it in the morning, before he brought his own in the morning. So then makrivin oisa yisadim shalom abayker. Then we're going to bring a holy sudden in the morning and a holy sudden in the afternoon, double. However, even though they double the flour, they don't double the oil, they don't double the levina. This is all from the hashdo. So they would separate the usual 3 loig of oil, the only 1 kaimetz of levina. Loigo mechza shemen, the chatzi kaimetz levina will be offered to the entire sudden of the morning, and the other half of the shear of the oil and the half of the kamitza will be offered with an entire Isadan Shalbeinu Arbayim Givaldi. And now we're starting with this with the Pedig Dalet. Pedig Dalet is going to speak about the pious. I know that I grew up in a place where pious is payas, not the payas. Pious is pay, yud, samach, and it means a lottery. Initially, who determined which coin will get to do the avodah? We learned this together. They would race up the ramp. Whoever won the race would get to do that avodah. And it became a little bit freilach. In Yerushalmi, we spoke this out when we learned Yuma. It says that one coin pushed another coin off the ramp and he killed him. In the Babli, it doesn't say he killed him. In Babli, it says he got injured. So it's not a machlekes Babli Yerushalmi. You have to know which one is to be taken literally and which one is not to be taken literally. But something not good happened, and they decided going forward that they're going to make a lottery, as will be described. Now, really, we'll learn that there were 4 lotteries done every day. They were done in the morning. Sometimes there was a 5th one that was done in the afternoon for the Ketaitis. We're going to go back to the Ketaitis. Now, what will be unique will be on Shabbos. What's unique about Shabbos? That on Shabbos, you have the change of the mishmaris. You have the change of the guard. So whoever was there in the morning is not going to be doing the avoid in the afternoon. So Shabbos had a unique number of how many lotteries were done. And there were more lotteries that were done in the afternoon. Pedig Daled is a shorter chapter. That's 14 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. It says that Rambam kol avodas so'el. All of these avodas that are done every day, and all has exceptions. Like, for example, whoever brought the ketaitis, who walked in with him that helped him out getting the ketaitis from the bazak, from the kaf onto his moloi chafnav, who did that? Ahuvai, kareivai. But normally you needed to have a lottery. But pious hoya oisin was they, and how did they do that? Hoya oisin. So all of the kohanim, it's not only of the mishmar, it's also of the beis av. Kol kohanim b'atei yavishol yoim nichnasim. They would enter into what chamber? Into the lishkas hagazis, which is also the chamber where the Sanhedrin would sit. And when would they enter there? Achar sheyal amud hashachar. If you remember, guys, in Yuma we had the machlekes Rab Sheshes, Rab Nachman, whether they were already garbed the big kahuna before the lottery, whether they were garbed after the lottery. Each one had a logic. The Rambam paskins like Rab Sheshes, who holds that if they would be dressed with their common big day choil, whoever won the lottery was so excited that they would run to do the avodah. They would accidentally do the avodah without being garbed the big day kahuna. So every coin that was eligible to enter the lottery, that's the way it already got dressed with the big day kahuna. Even though the Rambam holds that the avnei was shatnis. But going into the lottery is l'tzoyda chavoida. And then whoever won already was dressed. And now all the other kahana needed to get undressed, as we'll see in a moment. The heim already milubashim a big day kahuna. The Hamamuna Shalapayos is the one in charge of these lotteries, who stood with them, the hey, and they stand behakofa. Hakofa means, who knows the type of hakofa is? Circles. I don't know why whoever wrote this over here wrote a semicircle. It's a wrong translation, at least to my knowledge. And if I'm wrong, please correct me. Remember, they stood in a circle. Has to be that way. Now, Hamamuna, the one that's in charge, he, without a rhyme or reason, he just picked any one of the Kohanim in the circle and he removed his hat and he right away put it back on. We spoke about before that there was no yarmulke. They wore no yarmulke under their hats. And standing anywhere, ayid, without a yarmulke is not correct, even though the whole story of the mother of Rav Nachman, when she was pregnant, the Gemara in Shabbos, in other words, Yidden didn't always wear yarmulkes the whole time, but here he's standing in the base on Mikdash. He removed the hat and he put it back on. That was the way for the Mamuna to remember which coin will we begin counting. As we'll explain in a moment. Halacha base. Now, the Rambam is not going into how they made the lottery. The Rambam in Halacha base is saying that after the lottery was done, whoever won immediately goes to work. Why? Because the Rambam paskins, like we said, like Rab Sheshes, that everyone in the lottery was already wearing the bigodim. There was nothing that they needed to do after winning. You won the lottery, that's it. You went to work. Shara Kayanim, the other Kahanim, they were given over to the attendants who helped them undress from the Big Day HaKodesh. And when they got undressed, even though they were 4 Kayanim, 4 bigodim, for tznius, so they did not fully undress. They would take off 3 of the 4, but they would leave the mechmasayim, the Hasidic underwear, and they put on Big Day Choil. And then the chayzer and the fashion as a mechmasayim shel kodesh. And then, and always after they're covered, then they would remove the mechmasayim. They would give them to the chazanim, and the chazanim, the attendants. You understand how things change today? A chazan means a cantor. It doesn't mean a cantor. It means a chazan. He's taking your gatkes, you understand, and he's putting it into the lockers. So we learned that every group had 96 lockers. That's the lockers that we learned about. Now we're getting to the tachlis. How did they make the lottery? So they stood in a hakaf. They stood in a circle. Umaskimin, Alminian, and they all agreed to. Now, how do all Jews agree to? I don't know what it means. Why couldn't the Mamuna just agree to? They agreed. No, 80, 100. They picked a number, a large number. Now, they picked a number. If they picked 1,000, that's not because there were 1,000 kohanim. Even if they picked it, they can be there 4 kohanim. It doesn't matter how many kohanim. They picked a number. You might have to go around the circle many times to hit that number. But people have to agree to the number. Now, the Mamuna shouts out, Hatzbiu, stick out your fingers. And they would have an option, so you could argue 1 second. Everyone already knew whose hat was removed. They all agreed to the number. So how was it a lottery? Let's say that we agreed to number 20. I know which coin's hat is going to be removed. If for 20 kohanim, they knew where it's going to land. They didn't. The mazel, so to say, part is that when he shouted out, Hatzbiu, everyone had the option to stick out 1 or 2 fingers. No one knew that before. So even though you knew who you're starting with, you're going counterclockwise always. That's the seder of the way we always move, right? It should be al derech yamin. You can know how many kohanim, you can be very good in math. You'll never know where it's going to land because every coin had the option to stick out 1 or 2 fingers, as we'll see. Now, if a coin stuck out 3 fingers, which is not ideal, then we counted the 3. The only finger, now, what finger was not allowed to be extended was the gudel, was the thumb, because of the ramoyim. Because the thumb is a finger that you can easily hide. So if someone is looking and he's saying, oh, it's going to land here, he can manipulate it, or it's going to land by me. It's going to land by me. But it's not going to land by me. I'm going to be off 1. So we said 3 fingers is okay. So he's going to stick out. If the guy only sticks out the index, everyone will notice whether he sticks out the middle finger. But the thumb is a finger that it's possible to get away. So no one was allowed to stick out the middle finger. It's easy to stick it out or to bend it in. And if someone did extend their thumb, the thumb is not counted. All the other fingers were counted. Point is, because of this system, no one knew where it's going to end up. And the guy that's in charge would begin counting from Ish Hayadua. How was he Yadua? Because his hat was removed. And he would not count the people, God forbid, he would count the fingers. And if he, the number was 1,000, and there were only, there were only 200 fingers extended. So he would go around until he would hit that number. And the Ha'ish, Shalom Amin, and Eitzel Boy, he was the one, the pious Lidishal Avoid. Now, as we'll see in a moment, they made 4 such counts. They did it 4 times. But it wasn't that every time was for one Avoid. Many times, one pious was for many steps. And then whoever won step number 1, the guy next to him won step number 2, the guy insert him won step number 3. Now, why didn't you count people? So the Rambam says, you're not allowed to count Yidden, only through something else, as it says, how did they make the count then? They gave the Taloim. Now, why the Rambam doesn't count the half a shekel, I don't know, but he quotes a pasuk in Shmuel. Allah hey. Only one hand, the Yad Yamin. Now, guys, that was the big machlokes, but that's the way that Rambam paskins. What is the Rambam paskin? Here's the machlokes that we have. Tamid shel bein arba'im. So the Tamid shel bein arba'im was done by whatever you won for the morning, you did on the afternoon. And as we'll mention, the only exception was the Ketaitis sometimes. First lottery was to find out who was going to remove the ashes of the altar. And they fisoi. Now, in this case, not many people won. He won multiple things. Not only did he win to remove the ashes, he was also the one that's going to be Masada de Baracha. He's going to be the one that's taking up the 2 Gizrei Eitzel on his Be'ach. We learned that also yesterday or Friday or Thursday, that Bein Arbayim, 2 Kohanim brought up the 2 Gezarim. In the morning, 1 Kohen brought up both. He was the one that's going to take in the Machtam Alei Eshman HaMizbeach, Achitz HaMizbeach Azov, to offer the Ketaitis. Wow. And that's all lottery. No, lottery number 1 was one winner, but he won many things. Halachavav. Hapayis Hasheni. Zoichaba. There's 13 people that win. And how do they win it? The way they're standing. Like we mentioned. Ketzah. Hamamuna, who says Hatzbiu, extend your fingers. And the count was made as we just mentioned above. But the one who won, the number fell on 1. On Yankel. Good. He shechted the Thomas Shol Shachar. But that's all he won. The one standing next to him, we're going al derech yamin, where we dance around the beam on that counterclockwise, it's called in English, Hasheni, which is standing on his side, he won the merit of being mekabel the dam atamid. And the one who receives the dam will be the one throwing the dam. The third, next to the Sheni, won the merit of being medashin amizbeach hapnimi, which is also in prep of the Ketaitis. The fourth Shabbat Sidoi, Medashin Asamanoida. Not only did he clear it out, but he also was Umetiv Asanetis. The fifth one, Maila Rosh Atomid, Veragli Lakevish. Guys, we learned, right, how they used to dismember the Oilam. Now we're going through all of the people. I know the Oilah was made out of a tlep. It needed the minimum amount of Kohanim. The sixth brought up the 2 hands. The seventh of the winner, Maila Ha'oikitz, right, the tail with the regel. Hashmini Maila Hechazav behind the neck. The chi Mala Shtei Adafanis, the 2 Zaitlach. The Hasidi Maila Hakravayim, the innards that were in a bowl. Va'achadasar Maila Soilas Anasachim. Vashnei Masar Maila Chavitin. Vashloish Asar Maila Hayayin Shalanasachim. Halacha Zayin. The third lottery. Prior to this lottery, this announcement was made. Whoever never won the honor of offering the Ketaitis should do it first. As we mentioned, because Ketaitis brings wealth, and we wanted to give it to people that never got it first.
To do it first means be part of the pious.
Yeah, you don't even enter if you won. If you won, now it could be that everyone in this base have won, so then you can enter again. But if there are, and it was very rare that happened. Who do you give Sunday kois to? To the one who never had it yet. That's the logic. Yiskapzu etzel hamemuna, v'yofisu. Now they gathered and they made a pais. So Misha Yotzav pais zerisha, and he is the guy that wanted to offer the ketaitis. Now let me add a detail. So we said that they made 4 lotteries in the morning. Tamid, the 13 that we said, the payashem, whoever won the morning one got the same exact thing happened in the afternoon. Not so by the Ketaitis. If you still had people that did not get the Ketaitis, they would make another pious, a 5th one in the afternoon. The Rambam is going to write it explicitly. So now the 4th pious in the morning, the Skapsim Kul, and everyone would gather. Everyone would go. Here, if you remember, That's machlokes, right? The Rambam does not paskin like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. What was the question? The question is like this. We mentioned that whoever wanted bringing up the limbs, they would bring it up on the ramp, they would put it down on the ramp, and they would daven. The question is, who would bring it from the ramp to the fire? So the Rambam is paskening, it was another pious. It was not the same people. They made another pious to see who's going to win the merit of taking it from the ramp to the Mizbeach. And now here's another just important thing. I want to make a correction. Someone sent me an email because whenever I mention Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov over many years, I always say Kavanaki. And that's a mistake because there were two Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakovs. Like here, the Rambam is not paskening like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov was Kavanaki. There was one Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov that was a contemporary with Rabbi Eliezer ben Hunkers. There was another Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov that was a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva. There are two Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakovs. And the Kavanaki is on the first, on the original one. And if something is said by the latter one, we don't have to pasken like it. Now, Talmud shel bein arbaim, ema fisul payas acher. I will call kain shuzach vavedim and aved shachris. Yiska bein arbaim, with the only exception of the ketores. She'ema fisul payas acher bein arbaim. The yovoyu kol mishul hikter ketores ma'il man sheyesh levaz, and they should enter the lottery. But if everyone in this group already got the ketores once, then mafis and kulam b'shachris b'payas lishi. Then you don't do it twice. Then you only do it once. And v'zesh shuzach hashachris makirim bein arbaim.
The lotteries were only for things that were done every day by the time.
Yeah. Well, only that was the idea. Who's going to win the lottery? Correct.
When someone brought a carbon, it was any kind that was there.
If someone brought a carbon yachid, then he got to choose which coin should do it, but you did not make a lottery for it. And don't forget the coin that brought it did not get, we learned this last week or 2 weeks ago, the meats, the hides were divided to everyone. But still, people, if you want to do it, for sure, you bring your own carbon. Then you get to pick yourself. Now,
it was just the kind of that mishmar.
Yes, of that Beisav, of that mishmar. And the final thing, just speaking about Sandikois, which is the similarity to it, is ideally to be a Sandik all the way through. I think one big Hasidic Rebbe was asked, why don't they become wealthy? Whoever got the Ketores became wealthy. So he asked people to get Sandikois, they don't become wealthy, and he answered because they're not also Sandik Mu'um. So I know it's a covet, it's a kibbutz, but that's the right way to do it. And there's a guarantee that you'll become Gevir. However wealthy you are in LA, it's never enough. You'll become a LA Gevir. Halacha test. B'Shabbos, huh?
Sounds like there's a list there.
Sheyesham Tamidim Umusafim. Ooh, now we go. So first of all, we got to resolve two things on Shabbos. Number one is that on Shabbos, there was also the Musafim. There was also the two Bazichen that was on the Shulchan. So now Mefisin b'Shachar Anshi Oise Beisav. Now another detail. On Shabbos, you have the change of guard. You have the Mishmer that's ending, and you have the Mishmer that's coming. So the extra lottery was made by the one that's finishing their Avodah. They were the ones that brought the Mus. Umakriv and Tamid Shel Shachar and Ushnei Kipsei Oil Shel Musafin. It's not that they made another lottery. They won again. However, the Mishmar that's entering, they made another pious for the Talmud Shel Bein Arbaim. You know what the Rambam doesn't say? The Rambam doesn't write who brought the Shnei Bozichen. And everyone speaks. He doesn't write it. The Rambam was so organized. And they both divide in the Lechem Apanim, as the Rambam paskins, how it was done. Now the two Bozichen have to be offered. The two Bozichen is like the koinets of the 12 loaves. And the Levoina has to have melech on it like any other carbon. Halacha Yudalef, Achar Karban Musafin. It was after Musaf. Musaf was brought by the Mishmar Hayoitze. That was the last thing that they did. Now the two Bezichem was brought. The Rambam doesn't say who. You see that? He just says after. He's telling you when. He doesn't say who. Now that the two Bezichem were brought, now they divide the Lechem Apanim. And it was divided every single Shabbos of the year. How was it done? If you remember, the Machlek is 5 or 7 or 6 and 6. The Rambam paskin 6 and 6. Mishmar HaNichnas takes 6 chalas. Mishmar HaYoytze Noitel Sheish. The Mishmar HaNachnasim, the ones that are beginning, they divide those breads in the northern part. That's a more chashuv place to show that they're beginning to do the avodah. Now, hold on. When you have Yom Tov falling, if Yom Tov falls on Shabbos, what's unique about Yom Tov? On Yom Tov, all of the Kohanim are there. Or v'chein b'Shabbos that we call Shabbos Chol HaMoed. Now you don't divide it only amongst the two groups. Chol can call HaMishmaris b'Shabbos v'lechem hapan. However, im Chol Yom Tov Harishon Shel Chag be'echad b'Shabbos, if the first day Yom Tov is on Sunday, why are we mentioning it? Because many Kohanim came earlier to be there already. Chol can call HaMishmaris Shavah me'erev Yom Tov. Even there, you divide it amongst everyone because they come early. No one, you can't travel on Shabbos, so they would already be there on Shabbos. Similarly, if the last day of Yom Tov is on Friday, which means all of the Kohanim that are there are not leaving anywhere. And the Gemara speaks about the fact that so many Kohanim, there's only 12 loaves of bread. These were the times where the Tznoyim with Moishch and Yodayim, there was also a brach and the lechem upon him that even if you got a crumb, you felt satisfied. But there was that akana that kadeshi is achro Kohanim shvul chiluk lechem upon him. Now, this another reason why they made this takana that everyone should get, because one member of the Mishmar HaNichnas might have not been there on Shabbos. You understand? But people stayed on. No, it's Friday. When the last day of Yom Tov was on Friday, they were all there on Shabbos to get the lechem upon it. What's the advantage? Because next week you have a Mishmar HaNichnas. If one guy came late, then someone who's remained will get his part. In other words, you had all of the Kohanim here. Now, all of this is if Yom Tov falls on Shabbos or Erev Shabbos or on Sunday. What happens if there's one day break? So, for example, the first day of Yom Tov was on Monday. The last day of Yom Tov was on Thursday. Let me explain to you in both cases. I'll say this by heart. There's a machlekes that Rambam passes this understanding as follows. When you have Yom Tov, let's say that's beginning on Monday, you think about it. Now, the Mishmar change guards on Shabbos. Normally, the new guard would work the whole week. Here, how many days will they have? Only one day, if it's on Monday, because on Monday, all of the Kohanim are coming. People can travel on Sunday. You know what would happen by default? Not that many Kohanim would come, because they say to themselves, we're going to come only to work for one day. So there would be less Kohanim coming, even though you can argue all of the Kohanim have the right to work on Yom Tov, but they did not all come for Yom Tov. The same thing was with on Thursday, that if Yom Tov ends on Thursday, who was there until Thursday? All of the Kohanim. But that week's Mishmar, how many days did they have to work? Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, Friday and Shabbos, Friday and half of Shabbos. So that week's Mishmar, very few came. So in such a case where you have very few people of that Mishmar, they would not divide the bread 6 and 6. They would divide the breads 10 and 2. Let's read it inside. Or Chag means Sukkos, or if you have a Shavuos, so it's not the first. The first day is the last day. Point is that you have all of the Kohanim there anyways. So Mishmar Shezmanei Kavua, Zmanei Kavua L'Rambam doesn't mean the one going out, doesn't mean the one going in. It means the one that's going to work for a full week. They are the ones that are going to take 10. And the group that is only going to be working a day and a half, they will only get 2. Which is either Erev Shabbos or Echad B'Shabbos. And therefore the fact was not all the Kohanim, it was a very small amount of that Mishmar. First of all, you don't divide it amongst all of the Kohanim because Yom Tov is already a day removed. Secondly, the new Mishmar or the old Mishmar, depending Monday or Thursday, were very few. So if there was a small group, they got a smaller amount. Final halacha, you dalit. So the Rambam again paskin, you divided the bread 6 and 6, generally, not 5 and 7. That was a machlekes, I think, Tanoi. But hold on, it wasn't so pashut. The Kohen Gadol has the right to take half of each group. Doesn't mean he always took it. Because ultimately, he can take 3 and 3. Kohen Gadol, whatever they got, he can take half. He's zoiche in half. It's good to be the Kohen Gadol. As it says, so in other words, half to Aaron, half to Abanav. And 1 second, one thing, now did the Kohen Gadol always take, I don't think he always took half. But you know what? He cannot take anything less than a full loaf. He cannot take a half a piece. Because it's not the kvoidai of the office of the Kohen Gadol. So if he would say, I don't need to take all that, but he would have to take a full challah. And now that leads us right into today's final chapter, Pedekei, which is a short chapter. I think so. He's asking the lechem upon him. You can eat with meat, yeah?
Of another company.
Yeah. We learned before. You can eat. What you can't do is you can't mix them together. Yeah, but you can eat it with meat, sure.
You can eat the can go to a family.
If I'm not mistaken, it's like it has a din of kachin kachin. If it has a din of kachin kachin, only zichrei kohun. Only zichrei. If it has a din of kachin kalim, then it's whole family.
Then you can't mix it with kachim kalim.
And then you cannot mix it with kachin kalim, but you can eat it together. Mixing, eating it together is not a problem. It's in your mouth. Okay, now guys, we're going to learn about the lechem apanim. I know many people saw pictures of the lechem apanim. There's again a machlokes how it was baked. We're going to have the unique sheet of the Rambam. It was very thick. It's amazing. But when you see the pictures of the lechem apanim and they were like U-shaped, they were U-shaped when they were placed on the table because they extended the way that Rambam understands the way it was put on the table, and we didn't want the breads to extend. So while they were being put on the table, they were bent over. And I challenge you to make a piece of bread that's thick, 6, 7, I think 7 at boys. 7 at boys was like a rectangular box. And you're not allowed to break it. If you break it, you invalidate it, and they bent it over. You have to know how to bake bread. You have to be a baker. Pedek, where's tzemach? Pedek has 16 halachas, halacha aleph. Mitzvahs, asay, it's a positive commandment. When they organized it on the table on Shabbos. Not baked it. They organized it on the table on Shabbos, Lifnei Hashem, as it says, V'yam Shabbos. Here again, this is a pasuk at the end of Parshas Emor, right? When the Torah it sounds like a repetition. God forbid. It's the Torah speaks about the Menorah. Towards the end, it's in Shvi, and then the Torah speaks about the Lechem Apanim. Halacha Beis. The Davar Borur B'Torah. It's clear. The Torah writes 12. It's not a tradition. It's not Mipia Kabbalah. That watch, you should know many Hasidic Rebbes have 12 challahs on their tables. And even we, Pashat Yidden, one of the reasons why the challahs, they're braided. So how many braids do you put into your challah? I don't know. I don't make challah. Ask you whoever makes challah. But many people, for Shabbos, they have 6 braids. So like this, you have 12. Another minig Yisrael, unlike for Yom Tov, you make round challahs. For Shabbos, you make them vav. Why do they make them straight? Because Vav is 6 and 6. There's a lot that we do now that is Zecher of the God's breads. Kol Challah has to have the amount of 2 esroinim. And Lahoyer, the Rambam writes esroin nois. Sometimes the Rambam writes singular. Here you have it with a mem, with a shlos, mem esroinim. And va'orchen oisam, you have to make these 12 are organized into 2 arrangements, 2 sadarim. Sheish chalas b'chol seder, and the chalas were put one on top of the other, but not directly on top of the other for the whole week. Yes, on Shabbos, but we'll see later. But right after Shabbos, they would put between every chalam the 3 kanim that was made out of gold. Be'emes, we learned in base Abchira, right? It wasn't 3, it was 3, but between the 5th and the 6th, they only put 2. Why would they put the kanim? For wind to go through them, in order for them not to get moldy. And that's the source, if you remember in Yuma, because the miracle of the lechem apanim was it stayed fresh, smoking hot. They baked it on Friday, and when they took it off 9 days later, which is next Shabbos, it was still hot out of the oven. So if it's a miracle, why do you have to put the kanim so it should stay fresh? Because ain't soimchen alanes. You have to do what you have to do, and then God does his miracles. And the soimech kamaracha, and every of the 2 arrangements had these 2 kisavois. If you remember, kisavoy is a golden Y-shaped utensil that was outside, adjacent, holding the loaves that they should not lean over and fall over. The noisem mitzad kol manacha on the table proper. On the side of each one of these arrangements, they would have a keli. In it, they would have the fistful of frankincense of Levoina Shem, as it says, in this case, these are called the Bazach. That's the second time today we learned about the Bazach. Where else did we have the Bazach today, my friends? You remember, I think when it came to the Ketores, right? That the Ketores was put in a Bazach that was in the Kaf. Interesting why they use the same word. Nimtzur comes out, Shnei Kumtzi Levoina was B'Shnei Abozichin. Guys, this is a school for wealth. Everything we're learning today, we're learning about the Ketores. The Lechem Apanim is about Parnasa. Kol Harotzei La'asher is Yatzpin. Now normally the utensils that in the Beis Hamikdash had a pointed bottom, not a proper flat bottom. We don't want them to be placed. You're going to place blood, you're going to congeal it. But this vazichin b'shalayim oila vazichin kedei sheyanichom ala shulchan. The Eibishter created the human body in a way where we have shalayim to sit and learn. Some people never have the pointed bottoms and then they can't sit down. But that's nish good. They're bloody people. They're bottom people. You have to be vadim and you have to express it to learn with your fire. Both of these piles, ma'aklim zed, and both of the bazichin ma'aklim, they're essential. They're connected. We said the bazichin is like a koimitz from the six. The first time it's used will be on Shabbos. You put the new breads by removing the old breads on Shabbos, and you reorganize it. Now, many details we'll learn right now. The ones who remove the old 12 loaves, he will be the one that's going to divide it, as we learned in the previous chapter. Rambam paskins between the mishmaris and nechneses. They get it first. They eat it in tzvain. They get 6, and normally the other 6 for the mishmar that ended their shift, together with the kohen gadol, and they eat it over oichlin oisai halacha dalid. How would they mesader the lechem? So you needed to have a total of 8 kohanim, 4 for the new ones, 4 for the old ones. But shat 4, arba kohanim nechlas, shnayim biyodim shnei sedarim. One kohen held 6, the other kohen held the other 6. Then you had another 2 kohanim. Each one only held the bazach that had the levoina in it. Oh, it was not equal. It's like you get Hag Ben Galila, you understand? So here we go. 4 went in first. Another 4, those 4s were to remove the old. Now, the ones that entered, they would stand. Guys, you have to picture yourself in the Heichal. You're standing on the northern wall. Therefore, you're facing the southern wall. These are the ones that are entering. The ones that went in first to remove the olds, they're standing. Daraim, guys, the table wasn't the tzafim, but they're standing lidroimai of the shulchan. Upaneim l'tzafim. Stamla curiosity. What did we learn? We learned that King Solomon built with the first Beis Hamikdash another 10 shulchanis. That means he had a total of 11 shulchanis. A machlekes tamaim how they were placed. But the lechem upon him, I think, were only placed on one table. The question is, which table? Did they take turns? I don't know. The ones would remove the old, and at the same time, the new ones would place the new. In other words, there was never even a tefach of the shulchan exposed. Did it have to touch? No. Tifcha means within the tefach. So as the old ones were removed, the new ones were put. Yeah. We just said, no, the ones that are removing it are starting to the bottom of the table. So they are moishech to them. And as they're removing the whole arrangement, then the other ones are putting on the new one. The ones that removed the breads would put it, if you remember that in the ulam there were 2 tables. One was made out of marble, I think, or silver, and the other one was made out of gold. Why did they have the golden table? Because of the rule, at least not a maridin. These breads cannot be divided until the bazichin are offered. So it was put down. It was taken off a golden table. It can only be placed on a golden table. And that was in the antechamber. Then they would offer the bazichin. And then they would be mechalek the chalas. Now, if Yom Kippur falls out on Shabbos, one may not eat on Yom Kippur, not even in the temple. So they would leave the breads there until the end of Yom Kippur. Then they would only make the division. Lo erev. The ois fasting was not in watermelon, kiminogenu, it was so they would bring, we mentioned every challah needed to have the amount of 2 esrayim. So how a Yiddish math, so you have 24 esrayim. So they would bring esrim arba so'im of, 1 second, they would begin with 24, tremendous amount of wheat. The ones that are of the best quality, they're not wormy. The harayim menachas. And if you remember, when it came to the menachas, how they would get rid of all of the whole grain. We don't want whole bran. That's for behemoths. We want to have fine white flour, not bleached. And they would rub it. Remember, they would rub it and beat it 500 times, as we have to prepare all the chitim of the menachas. Then they would grind it, and then they would sift it. You know how many times, my friend? A very unusual number, 11 times. And we have in the Beis Hamikdash. Normally, we have the Chassidus explains. It says in Sefer Yetzirah, Esed B'Loi Teisha, not 9-11. 9-11 is Klipa. Right, 10 are not 9, 10 are not 11. But in the Beis Hamikdash, the Ketaitis was 11, and here they would sift it 11 times. In Chassidus words, it was 10 and 1. 11 is not a holy number, but 10 is the Shlemus, and the 1 is Lamaila. Arba ve'esrem, and imagine from 24 saw, you would only end up with 24 sarainim of really fine flour. And that would be used to make the 12 chalois, but the Rambam emphasizes they were matzahs, meaning it was not leavened, it was not chametz dik. Chametz in the Beis Hamikdash, only the 10 from the Torah, 10 of the 40 of the Torah, and the Shtei Alechem, part of the Shalmei Zivchei Sibur. Now, that's enough if they didn't sift it so great, or if they didn't begin with 24 something, or as long as you have fine flour, b'diavad it's kosher. Now, the kneading of it and the shaping, the fashioning of the loaves did not need to happen in the temple proper. It could happen outside the courtyard, but the baking of the loaves needed to be done b'fnim ba'azor k'shar menachas. And we've already learned about the metal ovens, which was an anomaly. Today, everyone has a metal oven. There's fancy names that I don't know of, but normally the ovens were made out of cheres, but this was made out of metal. The Lashon Oisai, they would only need one at a time, and they would bake them two at a time. Dafka. Halacha 8. There were 3 molds made out of gold that were needed in the preparation of these breads. One, by hachala, when it's only still a dough. The other one was the one that was used to put in the oven. Imagine they put in these ovens golden molds. And the third was after they removed it from the oven. See, guys, these challahs were very special. And as we'll see soon, they needed to be bended over. So whatever form they had, you needed to keep that form. So even after you removed it from the oven, you took it out of the mold that went in the oven, but you put it in a third golden mold. So it's sat in there as you're waiting for the next step. And when you waited the whole day because you're only allowed to bake it on Friday. You only put it on the table on Shabbos. So it would sit there after you took it out of the tanur, kadesha like to skalkel for it not to become impaired. And again, we're going to see in a moment that if these breads broke, they were a puzzle. So we kept them together. Kol challah mehem nirubas. Every challah was rectangular. As it says lechem panim. Why is it called lechem panim? Shiolei panim rabim. It should have many faces, many sides. Now, rectangular, you can have a box. A cube has the same amount of sides. Emes. The rectangular shape is because of the size of the table, as the Rambam beautifully explains. Like this. The length of every challah was 10 tefachim. The width of every challah was 5 tefachim. The height of every challah was 7 finger breadths. This is not chametz. A finger breadth is a thumb. That's a big, thick matzah. Now, the Rambam goes on. The shulchan, we know the measurements from the Torah. The length of the shulchan was 12 tefach. The width of the shulchan was 6 tefach. Halt cup. What did you do? How long was every challah, guys? 10 tefachim. You would put it on the width of the table. What's the width of the table? 6. Guys, if you're putting 10 on 6, what's protruding from every side? 2 tefachs. 2 tefachim. Exactly. That was the part that you bent over. So you put it out. It's called perpendicular. No, the opposite direction. The width was on the length. The length was on the width. Now that you put it on the table, you would fold up. So when you fold it up, it was a total of 10. How much did you fold up? 4. So you have the inner part of this lechem remain flatter, like a U. It was not allowed to break. Try that. And furthermore, they would put one challah on top of the other until they would have the whole arrangement of 6. Now, we spoke about the konim. The konim was not allowed to be put on Shabbos. Now, it's not even Doiche Yontiv. Wow. A Yontiv, when we are allowed to bake on Yontiv, when you will be eating it on Yontiv. It was not eaten. It was left on the table from Shabbos until Shabbos, minimally, as we'll see. And they would bake it on Erev Shabbos, but they would not arrange. They would arrange it on Shabbos. If you can't bake it on Yom Tov, what's the longest Yom Tov in the Holy Land? Even in the Holy Temple, Rosh Hashanah. So if Rosh Hashanah falls out Thursday, Friday, they would bake it on Wednesday. Im chal shnei yom shel Rosh Hashanah liyas b'chamish yom Shabbos, oifenoisim yom Ravi, halacha yud aleph, lo yisidra konim. The putting in of these konim that separated one challah from the other. The loy netilasam nor removing it was doicha Shabbos. Why is that? So here we have the Rambam paskins because it's nira keboina. Nira keboina. Tosfos says muktzah. I chevre ain't shvus b'mikdash. Yes, this is one of the shvusim b'mikdash because it was not necessary. Why? Because a nest happened anyway. So the whole thing, it was only put, it shouldn't get moldy. You're not going to get moldy. Ain't soimchen unless say that not to violate muksa that we were soimchen. Elam erev Shabbos nicht. So there was a lot. They put it on Shabbos, but they would enter erev Shabbos. They would remove the konim from the old breads before Shabbos. They would put it on the table. On Sunday, they would enter again, and they would now reorganize the 6 breads by putting in between one and the other 3. So the bottom one's set on the table, between 1 and 2, 3, between 2 and 3, 3. But remember, between 5 and 6, only 2. All of that we had above in Hilchos Beis Abchira. Halacha Yud Beis. Siddur Alechem B'Shabbos Mitzvasoi. You have to organize it on Shabbos. If you put the breads properly, but you didn't put the bazichen. You only put the bazichen on Sunday. You forgot. If Ula Shabbos Haba Hikter Bazichen, you know what the problem is? The bazichen were not there for 7 days. The whole thing is invalidated. Not only is the bazichen not that, the breads are invalidated. They're not even sanctified. If you put both of them on Sunday, and you said, it has to be 7 days. So the Chachamim, you know how they resolved it? So they said, okay, if it has to be a full 7 days, so I'll bring it on the 8th day. I'll bring it on next Sunday. Also not good. Shabbos means second Shabbos, which means if they put it on Sunday, you know what you do? You leave it there until one Shabbos. You can't take it off on Shabbos because it's not there for a full 7 days. You wait until the next Shabbos. That's halacha Yud Gimel. Whether you did it on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I don't care. So yaniach oisam sham al shulchan at sheyaver aleim yom Shabbos. Now on Shabbos you don't have to take it off and put it back. You know, like schach that's put by your goy. You don't have to do that. It has to be there on Shabbos, and then wait a full week. Next Shabbos. You can ask, maybe it's too long. Psulina. Guys, there's just like anything that's on top of the Mizbeach is not invalidated if it's overnighted. Anything that's on the Shulchan never becomes possible. See that as and if you organize it on Shabbos and you forgot to offer the Bazichen on next Shabbos, you brought it on Sunday, that's not good. Whether this Sunday, whether after Sunday, then the bread is also invalid. And they have a din of kachim shenifsalu, so they're still holy, but they're invalid. But since they're kachim, they can still become puzzle. Pigul noisav tamei. We're going to leave that for psuli hamekdashim. It's special late. Prakim yud zayin yud ches. That will be some important chapters. Halacha tezvav. Now, nifras hachalas achman alechem. If one of the chalas broke, if I would make it, it would break every time. You have to bend it over. Not you baked it in a mold. You baked them, they were rectangular. If they broke, like this, if it broke before you removed it, the whole lechem is possible. If the lechem is possible, what did we learn before? That the lechem and the frankincense, they're like a shidduch. If one is not good, the other one is not good. You cannot offer that incense. But if after you removed it off the table, prior to the offering of the bezichin, if then the bread cracked, the bread is invalid, but at least you can bring the bazichin. And the final halacha, tezayin, if the time came to remove it, when is the time to, what did we learn? We learned that it was taken off after Musa. So you should know it was removed in the 7th hour of the day. If that time came and you didn't remove it, it's as if you removed it in a good way. So therefore, even if it now broke for whatever reason, the bazichin can be brought. Afapi, even though you didn't physically remove it. When it's time to leave, it's time to get out of bed. It's ke'ilah, you're out of bed already. Nitma echad min asidarim. if one of these arrangements became tamei, bein lifnei aktara of the bozichin, bein la'aktar aktara, or shenitma echad min habozichin. So then we say, if it didn't break, if it's tamei, that which is tamei, but that which is pure could be used. The hatar b'taharasai, gevaldik